How confused do you get looking at the word map? Or you can't figure out why the West has tried to hurt Russia for so many centuries? Why are we on the brink of a nuclear holocaust and yet peace isn't seen as an option? Why live and let live dictum eludes our word? Welcome to yet another edition of WiseHeads. I am your host, Ashish Shukla. I want you to look at the word map. You would understand that the world's most powerful nations, that is the West, control the seas. From the Atlantic Ocean to the Mediterranean, to Indian Ocean, Arabian Sea, Pacific Ocean, you would realize that this collective group we call the West are master of the seas. United States, which straddles both the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean, has forged important alliances which give the West its hegemony. Across the Atlantic, the US has unyielding support of United Kingdom, Germany, France, Italy, etc., etc. Across the Pacific, this alliance extends to Japan, South Korea, and down south with Australia and New Zealand. This control of seas has given the West its hegemony of the last 500 years. With superior ships and weapons, they could loot and plunder the landmass they surrounded and thus got rich and powerful. They got rich by plundering Latin America, Africa, India, China, and countless other nations. There is no way they are going to discard this template which has served them so well for 500 years. In this simple strategy, though, there has always been a worry to take care of. What if the landmass they surround gets its act together? And if that happens, how would the West respond? Now look at the map again. You would see Russia and China and India occupying a fair bit of this large landmass. These three biggies also have nearly 40% of the world's population. The West also fears what if Russia is able to bring the Arabs and Middle East by its side. Then Africa would shift en masse to the Russia-China camp. Game over, you would say. These truly and existential questions are there for the West and both Russia. To stop the landmass getting together, the West has a few strategies up its sleeves. One is to create so much chaos and confusion in the landmass so that they never solidify and become a big bloc. So you see wars erupting from time to time in Middle East, Afghanistan, North Africa, Central Asia, etc., which is the West's way of creating chaos and anarchy. First, they try to have the governments which they could control. If the governments are nationalistic and are on an obstacle, they try to throw them through coups. That is, you fund rival parties, create social anarchy, or even influence military to take over. If all that fails, the West takes the support of terrorists who they mostly sponsor and arm with. Let me dwell a bit on how terrorism is an important weapon in the hands of the West. You see, Osama bin Laden, who later became an alibi for the United States to invade Afghanistan, was essentially a creation of the United States itself. When Libya was destroyed in the early years of the century, their arms were looted by the jihadis under the benign gaze of NATO. These jihadis were soon branded as the ISIS. The ISIS was soon wrecking Middle East and stoking terror. Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, etc., ISIS had declared its own caliphate until Russia intervened in Syria and ISIS disappeared overnight. But these terrorists were not dead. They soon descended to Africa. Now Africa is torn in ethnic conflicts, doesn't have a good security apparatus, and it's easy to create anarchy there, more so if the terrorists are looked after by the West. Now, West has no intention of leaving Africa. The United States has 29 military bases in the continent. France is what it is today because of Africa. France's own ex-president Francois Mitterrand once said that without Africa, France would have no 21st century. Without the resources of Africa, France would slip to the 30th largest economy of the world and not the 7th which it is today. Every third bulb which is lit in France is because of the uranium of Niger. Now, France has three trusted ways to ensure Africa remains under its thumbs. The first is to have puppet rulers who do what they are asked to do. It's called the Francafrique. The second way has been to force West African nations to use France's old currency franc, even though France itself has been using euro. Now, franc has been pegged to euro. Nearly 85% of reserves of these West African nations end up in French treasury. To run their own country, these African nations then have to borrow their own money from France at the market rate. The third way is to infest terrorists in these regions and then place their own army at the pretense of eliminating them. Yet the records show that despite the presence of French army and of the West, terrorists have only grown in leaps and bounds in Africa. The West also has a backup plan if all this doesn't work out. If their existential fear of landmass getting together still becomes a reality, if Russia and China get together and if Russians get the support of Arabs and then they begin taking control of Africa, to ward off this possibility, the West relies on the Sahel region. This Sahel region is of arid and semi-arid orientation and runs from the Atlantic Sea to the Red Sea in the African continent. This place is so inhospitable that it's easy to place terrorists in this region who create chaos and are difficult to eliminate. It's a barrier where the march of a landmass bloc would come to a shuddering halt. Worryingly, for the West, though, a few of these West African states are toppling their puppet rulers and turning towards Russia these days. Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger all have undergone a coup in the last 3 years. West, more so France, is naturally alarmed. It's nudging the West puppet body in West Africa, ECOWAS, which is Economic Community of West African States, to threaten a military intervention. Russia knows what is at stake, so it's warning ECOWAS not to take the military route. Russia has Algeria, a North African nation, as its military partner in the region. Algeria won't sit idle if Niger is attacked. So if ECOWAS still carries out its military threat, the region would plunge into a massive war involving many nations. Indeed, it would be an all-Africa war. So while all these months we have been worried on the Ukrainian question, it's the African question which could soon become, if anything, a bigger problem for the humanity. All because the rulers of our world don't want to leave the control they have exercised for the last 500 years. Even though the landmass is shaping up to throw off the yoke of the West. The process has begun. The days of unipolar world look limited. The multipolar world is ushering, but the rulers won't give up without a fight. Conventional wars are already happening. A nuclear war too can't be ruled out. And if that happens, the humanity is doomed. Worryingly, nobody is willing to pull back and seek peace. Both the West and Russia have existential issues, as I said. Anyone who loses now would become a footnote in human history. That's all in today's edition of WiseHeads. Hope you liked it. If you did, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel. We try to bring you a perspective which the mainstream media hides from you. This is your host Ashish Shukla, now bidding you goodbye. Stay strong, stay healthy, and stay happy.